Canada's premiers have just wrapped up a meeting with Indigenous leaders. For more, let's bring in the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak. She joins us live from Huntsville, Ontario this afternoon. And National Chief, appreciate you taking the time to join us on this busy day. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So how are you feeling coming out of today's meeting? And I understand there's consensus from the premiers that there should be a meeting of First Ministers and Indigenous leaders.
Oh, look, absolutely. I think that that's so important. I think First Nations have been waiting a long time. I'm thankful that we met with the Prime Minister and his cabinet last week. But I think that, this country would benefit from a First Minister's meeting to make sure that we're talking, about the path forward. I think that we've seen what the past, the many past decades have been like in our country. And I think that by working more closely together in the many years ahead is going to benefit our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. So I think that these conversations are long overdue, and we look forward to the First Minister's meeting.
And Chief, can you tell me a little bit more about the meetings today with the premiers and how you felt it went?
Well, first of all, I debated attending, and after careful discussions, of course, with chiefs from around my table at the AFN Executive, and of course with elders like Dr. Gwen Point that had said we have to keep trying. And I know that, because I think national chiefs before me have gotten frustrated with the format of these events. They have us in for the day before, and then they meet tomorrow, which is happening once again. They meet tomorrow, and then they make all of these decisions. And First Nations are in every province and territory where traditional First Nations lands cover all of Canada, and we've been very generous over the past since the creation of Canada. And we created Canada with we're foundational partners. First Nations are foundational partners in the creation of this beautiful country that we all share. And so I think it's disrespectful when First Nations voices are left off of tables of people making big decisions about this country. And I think that it's time that we really look to ourselves, look within, and say, how can we make this country a better place for all of us? And that's by working together, talking to each other, and finding the best outcomes and solution to move forward.
I want to ask you a little bit about what the Premier had to say, Chief, because earlier today he said, when he talked about the court challenge that's taking place to this infrastructure legislation in Ontario, he said that's 9 out of across the country, 400 or so. But just now, and I think you were standing right there, I'm going to quote him, he said, nothing moves forward without the green light of First Nations people. So what do you think there was some learning or something that happened with the Premier of Ontario today?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know that I lift up the First Nations who oppose bills that, look, First Nations want to move forward. They've never stopped prosperity in this country. They've been very generous, but they don't want our rights trampled on. And I think that, like I said, these conversations should have happened maybe before the passing of these bills. They're here now, they're law, and I know that there's still outstanding conversations that need to happen. And I think that, a First Minister's meeting on economic, discussions and economic opportunity and the way that we govern ourselves in this country, needs to happen. Like, I think that even most Canadians don't know that First Nations, we're the only people that are legislated around the entire world. And at the same time, they limit us on banking and access to Canadian banking systems. Like, all these things need to be talked about and brought forward, and finding a path forward so that our grandchildren, all of us, Canadians, grandchildren, as well as First Nations, our grandchildren together, that they're not having these same conversations 30 years from now. And I know that conversation and time and things, people like to do things the same way, but they can't be like that in 2025 anymore, and First Nations need to be at decision-making tables.
We heard also from the Premier, who said that a lot of the chiefs speaking today, a lot of the First Nations leadership speaking today, said they're tired of talking, they want consultation, but they want to get things moving. What's your sense of that?
Look, I think that First Nations always want a better life. It's disheartening when I was in a community just the other day to see, lack of clean drinking water in a home, and I think many of the infrastructure gap in this country is like $350 billion. And why does a child on reserve have to be without a hospital or without high-speed internet service, things that Canadians take for granted, access to good housing and reliable roads and infrastructure? And I think that we look to Canadians in Canada to help us close that gap. And we look to, of course, the premiers. We've echoed that again to them today to close the First Nations infrastructure gap. It has to be a whole of government approach, including, the provinces. And, we also talked about how we're a family. We're in a marriage in this country and nobody's getting divorced. So we have to make sure that we're, that we make this work. And, nobody's leaving anywhere. We live in the same house and no one's getting off of it. So.
And let me ask you a little bit about that before I let you go. I know this is a really busy day for you. You talked about Donald Trump and how united you are with other Canadians, of course, in kind of fighting, as you called them, these illegal tariffs. On that front, what do you think needs to happen next?
Well, I think a First Minister's meeting is a good first step. And continuing these dialogues, these discussions, but making sure that we get action out of it, of course, and working, I know that there's so many First Nations people from coast to coast to coast who brought position papers last week. We do invite you to our next Chiefs Assembly to hear from First Nations chiefs directly, September 3, 4, and 5 in Winnipeg, Manitoba, on Treaty 1 territory. But we'll have more to say after our September meeting of that when we're united as chiefs.
National Chief, appreciate your time very much. Thank you. That was National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations City, Woodhouse Nepinak.
Thank you.